Oh no, cringe.
Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is undoubtedly one of the best role-playing games of all time. It sits on the average score of 93 or 94 on Metacritic, depending on the platform, and it has made it to almost all the top lists of best RPGs since its release in 2003. And because that truly speaks to the exceptional standing of a game that's 22 years old, I want to look back with you today at this absolute masterpiece of a game and discuss its influence on gaming and the brand of Star Wars itself. However, there will be lots of spoilers here. I'll basically go through most important parts of the story to talk about the game, so if for some reason you still haven't played Knights of the Old Republic and you want to get into the game without any spoilers, you've been warned. Let's begin. Knights of the Old Republic comes from the golden age of Bioware, who were considered excellent storytellers for many years, partly due to this Star Wars game. While Bioware's reputation has somewhat diminished since then, the story of this game still ranks amongst the best the gaming industry has ever produced. The central figure of this game is a Jedi, Revan. Roughly 4,000 years before the events surrounding the Death Stars and the Skywalkers, the Old Republic faces yet another conflict with the Mandalorians. Just a few decades earlier, under the Sith Exar Kun, they had ravaged the Republic's space but were eventually pushed back. 20 years after this defeat, the Mandalorians returned, conquering worlds just outside the borders of the Galactic Republic to prepare for the coming invasion. To finally lure the Republic out of hiding, the Mandalorians nearly annihilate the entire population of a planet on the edge of the Republic's sphere of influence. This prompts the young and hot-headed Jedi like Revan to join the impending war, which initially does not go well, and they do that against the warnings of the Jedi Order, which suspects an even greater danger behind the conflict. Revan and his closest friend Malak then turn the tide with great skill and ruthlessness, destroying the armies and the empire of the Mandalorians. Revan himself defeats Mandalore the Ultimate and hides his mask on the ice planet. What's interesting is that Revan's own iconic mask comes from a fallen Mandalorian woman who actually died trying to defend a conquered people of the planet from the Mandalorians. When Revan finds the mask 10 years after these events, he swears never to take it off until all Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders are defeated. After the Rogue Jedi's victory, however, Revan and Malak do not return to the Republic but venture into unknown space with their fleet, apparently to hunt down the last remaining Mandalorians. Years later, the two suddenly return as a Sith Lord and his apprentice, threatening the galaxy with a significantly larger fleet of unknown origin. In the struggle of the Sith against the Republic, the Jedi eventually set a trap for Revan and managed to defeat him. However, Revan's apprentice Malak seizes this opportunity and basically bombards the ship of Revan, and as a result, takes the rightful place as the leader of the Sith. And not long after these events, the story of Knights of the Old Republic begins. You start as a bewildered patient aboard a starship boarded by Malak and his Sith. Your character begins with no memories, but manages to escape just in time with the war hero and the famous pilot, Carth Onasi, to the Sith-controlled city planet of Taris. Carth becomes your first companion and gives you your initial task.
Find Bastila and get off this planet.
Together, you must find the Jedi Bastila Shan, who also escaped the ship and who, thanks to her special ability called Battle Meditation, is invaluable to the Republic's war effort against the Sith. From here, the world opens up, releasing you into the first major section of the game, where you're familiarized with most of the game mechanics. Typically in a party of 3 with 2 companions, you explore the world, finding loot, fighting enemies, and engaging in a lot of conversation. In the often lengthy dialogues, you learn more about the world, individual characters and their motives, and naturally pick up side quests, which can often be resolved without combat through skillful conversation and by possessing the necessary skills.
Hey, I'd never disobey my orders. I'm not a fan of court-martials and executions. I was just talking, you know. Nothing anyone has to mention to the commander. Come on, Patrol, let's get back to it. The sooner we get this search done, the sooner we can get out of this mutant-infested hole. Move out!
You also delve into problems of your own companions, which often lead to new tasks you'll be able to complete in order to help them. Your decisions and conversations and your actions in missions often earn you points towards the light side or the dark side, reflecting your alignment and influencing your later force powers. Because, of course, you will ascend to become a Jedi during the game. Remarkably, all the dialogues, even with the smallest NPCs you meet along the way, are fully voiced, and that was not a given in 2003. The only character that remains silent is your own character, and the bodies of the enemies you leave along the way. As you work your way through Taris, from the clean apartments of the upper class down to the Rakghoul-infested Undercity, you level up and develop your character and companions in your preferred direction. You allocate points to classic attributes and skills, and unlock feats that help directly in combat or with hacking terminals, repairing droids, or even persuading the greedy huts you encounter along the way. Underneath all of that is a D&D-based rule set where your chances of success are determined by dice rolls. Thus, the action-packed combat takes place visually in pausable real time, but is actually calculated internally in turns. You can let your party members act on their own, but you should always pause the game and queue up the best possible actions in the command queue. Only through the clever use of med packs, grenades, shields, a force stun on droids or people, or even something like the Force Storm, which causes area damage, can you overcome the game's quite challenging fights. The game isn't excessively difficult, but it doesn't hand you victory either. Since enemy strength isn't always perfectly balanced, and sometimes the dice just roll against you, you'll find yourself reloading from time to time to ultimately find the right playstyle for you. You unlock a total of 9 companions who can fill different roles in the party and often chime in during conversations based on their alignment.
I know we have to be careful about drawing attention to ourselves, but are we gonna just let them drag this guy off?
The conversations and the plot are generally serious, though the game frequently injects moments of humor in there.
If you haven't given us enough money, I guess we're gonna have to take it out of you piece by piece.
No, please! Take my wife and children instead. Anything!
Wife and children. Sounds like a good idea.
Particularly iconic is the quirky assassin droid HK-47, initially introduced as a simple translation droid who then reveals his charming way of expressing his bloodlust.
Extrapolation. It would seem that we are at least worthy of curiosity for the moment. I would much rather this get bloody, Master, but it is your call.
If you repair HK's damaged memory core, he delightedly tells you about the gruesome fates of his previous owners.
I do not know why my master was so upset, really. He was an officer of SciTech and a potential target, but I cannot terminate my own master. I would assume that being the sole officer remaining, he would surely be promoted. Instead, however, the human chose to go insane with rage and attack me.
But the others are well established as well. The Jedi Bastila struggles with her emotions, the Wookiee Zalbar owes you a life debt after Taris, and the Mandalorian Canderous Order has his own unique perspective on things.
Every new warrior has to fear to understand how to beat it. You must know that.
And the plot is as varied as the companions. While your decisions can fundamentally change the overall story, they can lead to different outcomes in many situations. For example, if you don't use the right tone when dealing with the Sith-indoctrinated Selkath children, you might have to kill them and deliver the sad news to their worried father. So your actions truly impact individual fates, giving many questlines significant emotional weight. Furthermore, the game manages to almost always place violent confrontations within a fitting context. You rarely get into fights just because the game decided so, but usually because it makes sense based on the environment and the plot, and this greatly enhances immersion. Added to this is the power of the Star Wars brand. The music alone is fantastic, and by freeing itself from the constraints of the films and establishing a completely new, well thought out era, Knights of the Old Republic was able to showcase the possibilities of the Star Wars universe much more freely. Of course, the game doesn't look very good today, even if you install the mods to play it in the 16:9 resolution, but back in 2003 it was a pretty good looking game, and today you can even play it on mobile devices because there is a port for that, and you can also play it on Switch. Let's get back to the game itself though. While there's plenty of combat, you also engage in minigames like the card game Pazak or Swoop Racing, where you can win some money. During gameplay, you're often rewarded especially well for carefully reading datapads and using the information to, for example, crack a safe. Your brain power is also put to the test now and then. Entire quest chains consist purely of exploration and conversation without ever becoming boring. On the second planet, for instance, on Dantooine, a side quest involves a murder case that you must solve by questioning witnesses and evaluating clues, purely through deduction, as the game doesn't simply give you the answer if you click through enough dialogue options. You have to spot the contradictions yourself, otherwise the lead investigator leaves and reports your incompetence to the Jedi Council. And on the neutral ocean planet of Manan, where the native Selkath harvest the war-critical Kolto, you even become a defense attorney in court trying to prove the innocence of a Republic war hero. If you don't gather enough evidence or choose just one wrong answer, the accused will hang from the gallows for the murder murder of a Sith. But moments like these can lead to difficult decisions. Although Knights of the Old Republic is clearly designed for you to play as a shining hero rather than an evil villain, not everything is always black and white. This can become apparent during the trial I mentioned, when it turns out that your client actually committed the murder he's accused of, forcing you to choose between the interests of the Republic, personal sympathies, and justice. This is even more evident in the main story, where things are far from being as clear as they seem, and that's due to the game's major twist. But we'll get there soon.
You mean... Oh, this can't be true, can it? You really don't know what's going on here, do you? Well, I won't be the one to deprive Malik of the pleasure of telling you himself.
First, on Taris, you track down the captured Jedi Bastila, ally yourself with the underworld gangs on your rescue mission, win a swoop race, and finally break the blockade that Darth Malak has established over Taris to capture Bastila. When it becomes apparent that he's bound to fail in his task, he orders the complete destruction of the planet's surface. Having narrowly escaped the apocalypse, your group travels to Dantooine to meet the Jedi Order. There, the Masters discover a strong Force sensitivity within you and accept your character as a student. When you master the training program in record time, and you and Bastila experience puzzling dreams about Revan, Malak, and a mysterious star map, the Masters send you and your crew to investigate the mystery. The Council suspects that it might be the source of the Sith's power. It eventually turns out that Revan and Malak had found a secret thing called the Starforge, which could actually be located using several map fragments. And these, of course, are scattered across many planets, because you have to have a reason to play this game.
Are the secrets of the Starforge so valuable? Can its power truly be worth the risk?
You then tackle the planets of Tatooine, Kashyyyk, Manaan, and Korriban in any order to find one of the map fragments on each of them. Each planet has its own exciting main storyline. In Kashyyyk's case, for example, it's the Wookiee uprising against enslavement by the Zerka Corporation, which, like the Exchange Criminal Syndicate, appears repeatedly throughout the game world. But I think my favorite to this day is Korriban, when you need to pose as a Sith student in their academy. After completing 3 of the 4 planets, you are captured by Malak's Admiral, Sol Karath, and during your escape from his command ship, you encounter the Sith Lord himself. He then confronts you, rather smugly, with the improbable truth. You are, in fact, Darth Revan yourself. Who, up until that point, was never shown without his mask.
What? You mean you don't know? All this time and you still haven't figured it out. I wonder how long you would have stayed blind to the truth. Surely some of what you once were must have surfaced by now. Even the combined power of the Jedi Council couldn't keep your true identity buried forever, could it?
And so it is revealed that Bastila, as part of the boarding party on Revan's ship back in the day, kept you alive and brought you to the Jedi Council. There, your damaged mind was restored and reset. Malak skillfully points out that you were then ultimately used merely as a tool against the dark side. You can then use this revelation as a reason to continue following the path of good, or turn back to evil. However, both paths ultimately lead to a confrontation with Malak, as he isn't willing to simply give up his position. Since you are not yet ready for the final confrontation at this point, Bastila sacrifices herself, allowing you to escape and collect the last piece of the map. In the end, it turns out the Starforge is an incredibly powerful factory fueled by the dark side of the Force, capable of creating entire war fleets in a very short time. The destination planet also reveals itself to be the home of a precursor species that subjugated the galaxy thousands of years before the Old Republic. The highly Force-sensitive species, the Rakata, was nearly wiped out long ago by civil wars triggered by the malevolence of the Starforge and a mysterious plague that targeted the Rakata's connection to the Force. The formerly subjugated peoples of the galaxy then destroyed almost all evidence of their oppressors. Only a few ruins and the Starforge above Rakata Prime remained. As the Republic fleet attacks the Starforge and the surrounding Sith Armada with all its might, you first confront Bastila within the Forge itself, now turned to the dark side through torture. If you defeat her, you can bring her back to your side with the right words. And then, finally, after about 40 hours spent in the game, you face the final battle against your old friend Malak.
I alone must accept responsibility for my fate. I wanted to be master of the Sith and ruler of the galaxy. But that destiny was not mine, Revan. It might have been yours, perhaps, but never mine. And in the end, as the darkness takes me, I am nothing.
While the credits roll shortly after in Knights of the Old Republic, the story surrounding the game is far from over, as its impact is enormous. Not only was the game a huge commercial success, but its core design also served as a gameplay template for the Mass Effect series, which I love greatly. Furthermore, the story is continued a few years later in Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords, that's actually done by a different developer, Obsidian, and this time without Revan. However, Revan as a character is so well established that he secured a firm place in the broader Star Wars lore, even surviving Disney's acquisition of the Star Wars franchise and apparently remaining canon in his essential aspects. Various vague references to him and the Rakata in the recent Star Wars productions are proof of this. Additionally, there's a novel about Revan exploring the backstory of his fall in more detail and ultimately leading into the events of the MMO Star Wars: The Old Republic, where he appears multiple times, even though the MMO is set about 300 years after the original game. And since this video is already pretty long, let me actually summarize it real quick. By the end of their war, Revan and Malak learned from the dying leader of the Mandalorians that the Sith, believed to be extinct at the time, were actually behind everything that was happening. They had indeed incited Mandalore to attack the Republic, and thus Revan and Malak investigate and discover that the Sith are working on their comeback in a distant system under the Immortal Emperor. When they arrogantly confront him but fail to defeat him, they are turned by the Emperor to his cause and sent as Sith Lords to find the Starforge, thereby preparing the way for the return of the true Sith. And now one final spoiler for what happens after Knights of the Old Republic. After his redemption, Revan once again takes up the fight against the Emperor but is captured again and imprisoned for nearly 300 years. While the Emperor tries to break Revan's spirit, Revan influences him in turn through an endless mental struggle, thus hindering his plans. Ultimately, Revan is freed by the player's actions in the Old Republic by Republic strike teams, after which he finds a Rakatan droid foundry he intends to use to finally stop the Emperor. However, Revan meets his more or less definitive end when an Imperial strike team confronts and kills him. Exactly how much of all this will ultimately become part of Disney's canon remains to be seen. In the meantime, however, the official remake of Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic awaits us. Hopefully, after a long period of silence, it is officially being developed further by Saber Interactive, and it might answer some questions about the canonical future of the hero and the villain if the game actually comes out at one point or another. I hope you enjoyed this retrospective look at one of the best Star Wars games ever made. I highly recommend coming back to this game even today. It's really fun to rediscover what Bioware did those 22 years ago. And if you haven't played the game yet and you liked what you heard in this video, I think there's still lots of things to discover in Knights of the Old Republic on your own. Thank you for watching. Take care.